We're live. Salam كاع الناس اللي كيتفرجوا فينا, and welcome to our first episode of Café History. We're so glad to have you with us. حنا فرحانين بزاف باش تكونوا معكم ريتا رشدي, واحد من المجموعه اللي خدمات على Café History باش تكون عندنا اليوم. معنا اليوم هبه اللي انا وياها خدمت اولا ان تكون عندنا كافي هيستوري, ومعنا الدكتور ستيفن تريفاثان اللي هو المشرف ديالنا اليوم اللي غادي يتكلم لنا على الموضوع اللي شارنا معكم. هبه
شكرا بزاف ريتا. دونك تبغي تقدمي لنا كافي هيستوري ريتا, تقدمي الناس.
كافي هيستوري هي واحد الفرصه اولا للقاء مجموعه من الناس بيناتهم اللي الشغف ديالهم اساسا هو انهم يربطوا بين التاريخ وبين شنو كيوقع في العالم ديالنا حاليا, سواء كان الامر هو احداث اللي كنعيشوها بحذافيرها دابا, ولا ايديولوجيات اللي بنيت على عده احداث شهيره التاريخ واللي مازال كنامنوا بها دابا او كنتابعوها دابا. شحال ديال القيم اللي حنا فعلا كنامنوا بها دابا واللي كانت اللي كنامنوا كنلتزموا بها, واللي هي عاشت قصص عبر التاريخ, اللي تكونت عبر التاريخ واللي حنا ربما ما عارفينش عليها. حنايا اليوم شغوفين باننا نتبعوها تاريخيا ونعرفوا القصص ديالها. الهدف ديال الكافي هيستوري هو مناقشه التاريخ بطرق مختلفه وبوجهات نظر مختلفه, والمهم ان الهدف ديالنا هو اننا نخليو واحد البلاصه هذه مكان عام للحوار بين كل شيء فين يقدر كل شيء يشارك اي وجهه نظر ديالو.
شكرا ريتا. So Cafe History is an opportunity for you to discuss many ideas about history and compare it to current events. So the aim is to have a sort of a panel or a discussion that gives people the chance to speak up and to also discuss new and different perspectives about history. Actually, in our episodes, we overanalyze historical episodes and try to deconstruct the dominant narrative by inviting guests and historians and experts so that they would help us in this process, and they would also give us a new perspective and new narratives as well.
اليوم معنا الدكتور ستيفان تريفاثان, هو اللي تزاد في نيويورك وكبر في بورتوريكو, غريس وجرماني, وحتى في اليونايتد كينغدوم اللي هي المملكه المتحده من بدايه الثمانينات. هو قرأ جميع الليفلز في اليو كي, وفي الاخر 7 سنوات اللي دازت كان خدام ككونسلتنت اي مستشار في alternative education, يعني في الدراسات المتغيره. هو استاذ ومحاضر في جامعه الاخوين في مقارنه الاديان وفي الفلسفه, وحاليا هو خدام في جامعه الاخوين في إفران. هبه غادي تعطيكم البايوغرافي كامله بالانجليزيه حاليا.
I actually have a technical issue. Oh, there you go. It's done. So Dr. Stefan Trevathan was born in New York and raised in Puerto Rico, Greece, Germany. I still have the technical issue. And the UK. Since the early 80s, he has taught. Since the early 80s, he has taught at all levels of education in the UK, culminating in the role of senior lecturer in education at Repton University in London. And for the last 7 years, alongside working as an educational consultant in alternative education, he has continued to teach philosophy, comparative religion, and philosophy of religion at master level at Al Akhawain University in Morocco. His main interest lies in the tensions between rationality versus non-rational. He has a master's in philosophy of education and a PhD in philosophy of theology from the University of Birmingham in the UK. And he is currently engaged in the 2nd year of the D-Prof course in existential psychotherapy, and he has published many works. He has published work in academic books, in articles mainly in philosophy and education in the UK, Australia, and Spain.
Okay.
Okay.
Time for me or?
It's still not. We're just doing a bit of introduction of what we're going to be talking about, and then it's promise lasting. I just want to start with introducing what we are talking about today and why we choose to talk about it, mainly because we have Dr. Trevathan, who is an expert and who can talk to us about these things. But personally, me and Hiba, from our experience as students studying in middle and high school, we had a problem about what we have learned about enlightenment. What we have learned was purely positive. We learned that it was a purely positive movement that led to only positive things, and mainly for Europe. And when we're talking about that, I remember that we had a lot of things, just that the books had a lot of things to say about philosophers from England and from France. So it was purely Western European things. And today we want to do this deconstruction to see enlightenment in another way, under another light, under different lenses and more perspective. And we want to more accurately see it from global lenses and truthful lenses in a way.
شكرا ريتا. كيف ما قالت ريتا، من خلال الدراسات ديالنا في الاعدادي والثانوي شحال من مره قرينا على الانلايتمنت، واخا غير دزنا عليه دغيا في اجتماعيات وفي مواد اخرى اللي بحال الاجتماعيات. دوينا على موضوع عصر الانوار اللي دائما كان كيتركز حول اوروبا، واللي كان ديما كياخذ واحد الطابع ايجابي 100%. يعني ان الاساتذه ديالنا عمرهم ما تطرقوا الوجوه الاخرى ديال هذا العصر. واليوم الهدف ديالنا هو اننا ندرسوا الوجه الاخر ونديروا اعاده النظر في العصر الانوار، ونحاولوا نشوفوا التاريخ بطريقه اخرى من غير اللي قراونا في المدرسه.
And Dr. Trevathan, we want to start with you now. We're asking you, how can you define enlightenment first?
Okay, thank you very much, Rita and Hiba. Assalamu alaikum to everybody else. I'm very happy, very honored. I think this is a great initiative, and I hope it's something that you'll carry on doing. Okay, what I'm going to talk about today is the Enlightenment period, and as Rita was saying, it's usually portrayed in a very positive light. And there are reasons behind that. And what I hope to show you today is that in a way it's, I'm not going to say anything but positive, but it very much has had its, shall we say, detrimental effects on the world. And I can say, I think with complete confidence, that indirectly, we could between indirectly and directly, we could say that the current situation that we're in today, both vis-a-vis the coronavirus and vis-a-vis the problem, the racial problems and the post-colonial attitudes, I can say that in between directly and indirectly, we could place some of the responsibility for this on the Enlightenment period. There's a bit of a noise in the background. Can you hear it?
Just a little bit, but we can hear you clearly.
I'll try and carry on regardless. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
So, yes, the thing about the Enlightenment period and about what we're going to speak is that it is something which is so woven into us, whether or not we're aware, because sometimes we're not even aware. It's woven into our very mentality and our very conceptual frameworks, what we call the paradigm, or what we call our discourse of thinking, whether we were born in Morocco or not. Yeah, though Morocco is an excellent example of a traditional society, a traditional, shall we say, sacred society, which up until very recently was not totally part of the modernist view, which has come out of the Enlightenment period. Okay, so Morocco is a very good place to see the transition. And you and your generation, and anybody else listening, if you're the same age as Rita and Hiba, you are in a world of like barzakh, should we say, between two worlds, yeah, which has its advantages, but I think also has its disadvantages. So, just to start, the European Enlightenment period occurred during the 17th and the 18th century, in which ideas about God, reason, nature, tabia, humanity were turned upside down. All right. prior to the Enlightenment period was a period called the Renaissance. Yeah, the Renaissance from the 15th to the 16th century, which took what we call a humanist inspiration from the concept of the Roman theory of humanitas, which means basically also from Greek philosophy as well. For instance, Protagoras, who was a Greek thinker, said that man, meaning human beings, is the measure of all things. Okay, so humans became, in a sense, the center of the universe, whereas previously the world was seen through the presence of the divine, to the presence of God. Okay, so this idea that man in the Renaissance period, this idea that man was responsible, was the center of the universe, was where things would happen. We can see this in art, architecture, politics, science, and literature. For instance, the paintings of someone like Leonardo da Vinci, where they were intent on getting the picture to look as realistic as could be. So if you see what I mean, human-centered. Okay, so to be not iconic, not symbolic, but actually to be as human as possible. And also, it is a period when the statues were made, as in the Roman times, to be as physically realistic as possible. Okay, so it was human-centered. Yeah, it doesn't mean that the divine had been taken away, but it was more humanist-centered. And the Renaissance period is seen as a time of pessimism about the past, about the way people thought in the past, etc., and also some nostalgia for the way the world was at the time of the Roman and the Greeks. Okay, now it's really important, we talk about the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, not to think that one day everybody woke up, boom, and it was the Renaissance. Yeah, and then some 200 years later, boom, one day everybody woke up and everybody was enlightened. No, it was something which happened gradually over a period of time. But anyway, the Enlightenment period, yes, it occurred, and it did occur in Europe. We can say that it's a European phenomenon. But the important thing is that it is now, or should we say, the effects or the after effects of the Enlightenment are all over the world. Yep, I can think of very few places where the Enlightenment after effects are not in play. The modernist mindset is as a result of the Enlightenment. So I can't think where, there may be some small enclave somewhere, thousands of miles away, but I can't really think one offhand. So, however, it is interesting to note that there is one country in Europe which did resist the Enlightenment, and that's, interestingly enough, our neighbor, which is Spain. Okay. Alexandre Dumas, the French writer, said that Africa begins at the Pyrenees. Okay, so they saw Spain as being not enlightened. Okay, and in a sense, it resisted this up until, some people say, up until the death of Franco in the 1970s. So let's get into the Enlightenment a bit. I know this is historical, but we're going to have to grapple a little bit with the philosophical concepts. So I'm going to try and make it, as comprehensible as possible. Okay, without dumbing down. Okay, so to essentialize the Enlightenment period, I think the best thing we can do is to take two people who epitomize the kind of the Enlightenment period. One of these is someone I'm sure that almost everybody on this broadcast will have heard, who is Rene Descartes, who said, the cogito res, je pense alors je suis. Okay, I think, therefore I am. Okay, so philosophically, the problem with this is that if we call it the meaning maker, for instance, all of a sudden, from the Descartesian point of view, the human being, the individual, becomes the meaning maker. Okay, so meaning is not something which is which is evident of itself, or which is revealed, or which is accepted by the world around, but all of a sudden which comes only from the self. Okay. It's also, the Cartesian effect is one where the mind and the body have been split. Okay. The mind is one thing and the body is another. And for some reason, the mind is considered to be superior. Okay. Because the mind, according to Cartesian theory, the mind can be objective. Yeah. So the spirit is, so well, basically two things. One, the mind and the body are separate, and also the mind and the spiritual. Okay. If one believes that human beings also have a spiritual aspect, ruhaniya, I'm not talking necessarily religiously, just that there's a spiritual aspect to human beings. So the mind is separate from the body. The mind is separate from the body and the spirit. Okay, according to the Cartesian, right? Whereas traditional societies, which we can see here in Morocco, there was no difference between the mind and the body. Yeah. When a person went into the countryside and looked out at the world, looked out through in a valley where there was a river, they were, in a sense, they were at one with their surroundings. Yeah, they were at one with their surroundings, and they did not see their surroundings as a means by which they would make money or economics. Okay, they were at one. Yes, they might use the land or something, but they did not see it as something which was separate to themselves. So to harm the environment was to harm themselves. So as I said, the Cartesian ontology separates the knowing mind from the unknowing body. Okay, the body is not a sentient being. It doesn't feel things. It just functions. It's just functional in the Cartesian mind. But the mind is knowing. Okay, so it's superior for that reason. So in some form or other, it lays stress on the human as an observer. Okay, as a kind of a passive observer that looks around and sees what's there. It's separate. It observes, and somehow inferior to the knowledge, as I said, which is in the mind, which comes from the observation. So let's see. So this Cartesian idea, according to almost all philosophers, there are a few that disagree, but according to almost all philosophers, has led to many forms of conflict, such as rampant individualism. You can see where that's coming from. Materialism, and many forms of conflict based on notions of right and wrong. Okay, Cartesian thinking is what we call a dualism. It has everything is right or wrong. Everything is black or white. Everything is is based on dualism. Okay. The other person that I would like to put forward to you is someone called Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who was a German, born 1646, 1716, puts him right in the middle of the Enlightenment period, and he was one of the main figures of the Enlightenment. Okay, he was what we call a polymath, a person of many different specialisms, many different types of knowledge. Okay, he's very famous in the mantak, logic, analysis, and also he was a mathematician, and he's the one, you may hate him now, but he invented calculus. Okay, so those of you who don't like calculus, he invented calculus, and also the binary system. Okay, so we can see very much the Cartesian mind at work here. But he wrote a book which is called The Principle of Reason. Okay, so what we see here now is we're moving on to seeing reason and rationality as being the primary driving forces in life. Okay, and he puts forward in The Principle of Reason something which is called the Principio Rationis, which means basically it's a formula which is nothing, nino est sin ratione, nothing is without reason. In other words, everything has to have a reason. Okay? In other words, there is no mystery. There is no paradox. because everything must have a reason. If we don't know why, it's because we just haven't found out yet. Everything has to have a reason, okay? So another one is the nihil est sin ratione is another way of putting it. This is nothing is without grounds, okay? That was grounds, in other words, there must be a grounding for a reason. There must be a principle for a set of reasons that come afterwards. So the only problem with this, which has now come to light, and the result of this is such. If we say that a principle is the ground for lots of other things, I'm trying to think of a good example. If we have the grounds that broccoli is a good food, yeah, then there are several different things that come from there, yeah. So, but if everything has a reason, then when we get to the ground that broccoli is good, then what's underneath there? What is the principle underneath the principle? Yeah. And then we get into something which is called an infinite regress. Okay, so that we keep on looking every time for another reason, for another reason behind, for another reason, and we go on and on and on. And what happens is that we realize that life is groundless. There is no grounding. Yeah, there's no reason. Okay, because we just every time we get to a principle, a cause, the cause of something, we find, oh no, but what is the cause of that? And so what results is what we call is nihilism. Okay, where a world in which people grow and develop, but with no meaning. Okay. We can see one aspect of this is the high rate of depression, okay? Because depression equals the idea that, you wake up in the morning and what do you wake up for? What's the point? What's the meaning? What's the meaning of my friendships? What's the meaning of my family? Yeah. So this idea, though no one's saying, oh yeah, Leibniz said this, no one connects those up, but that is the sort of the background to this idea, to the idea of depression, that life becomes meaningless, okay? Also, Leibniz also formulated the same thing. He said the same thing, but in different ways. For every truth, a reason can be given. Same thing, really. It's called the Principium Redendae Rationis. So redende means to give back. For something, everything that's given, everything that happens must give a reason back. Must give a
I think Dr. Trevathan had a problem with connection now.
Are you back?
Okay, it's back. Okay, it's fine.
I could hear you. You couldn't hear me. Okay. So the point is, the philosopher called Heidegger says, okay, who do we think we are? Who do human beings think we are that we can demand, or we can ask, or demand a reason for every single thing? Okay. Can we not have mystery? Can we not have paradox? Can we not have things which we don't have an answer for? In fact, there are many things that we don't have answers for, and things that we may never know, and we should be happy with that. Okay. One of them, of course, is the first thing that we could talk about, the big one, what you call the big G, is the question of God. Okay, the question of God. Now, philosophers and theologians have tried to prove that God exists, but philosophically that is impossible. Okay, even the Kalam, the famous Kalam of the Islamic world, people like, not that Ibn Rushd was from the Kalam, but the Mutakallimun, the Kalam, even they put forward arguments, but those arguments, frankly, can be disavowed. Yeah, but what does that mean? That means nothing. It simply means that you cannot prove the existence of God by philosophy. Okay, you can't prove the existence by philosophy. That's all it means. So let me see. So now, what has occurred in our present times? How much more time have I got? 10 more minutes, is it, or so? Less? How much more time?
I think we still can have like the extra 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. Am I making sense to everybody? Is it clear? I hope it's not too complicated.
It makes. I think it makes total sense for us. But from judging from the comments, I think everybody's fine. Nobody is asking questions. So
okay. Okay. Right. Okay. So what is the result of all this? The result of this is that the way in which we think, which is so close to us that we can't see it. It's almost as if it's, right under our nose. We can't see it. The way that we think, modernists, I'm wondering if your great grandparents thought this way, and I doubt it very much. But the way in which we think is employed for demanding reason, and also the way in which we think has been reduced solely to calculative thought. What's called calculative thought. That means where we measure and compare, et cetera, et cetera. So the means of human thinking has been reduced more and more to a kind of a single track type of thinking, okay, a mono-track type of thinking, which is called calculative thinking, okay, which usually involves maths, science, comparison, measuring, weighing, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what happens here? So the common denominator, we almost return to the way the original Enlightenment thinkers thought, which was the common denominator between now and then, was the confidence that each person was a rational individual who could arrive at autonomy, independence, intellectually, socially, religiously, because they weren't atheists, and also emotionally. Mathematics was considered the chief tools of reason. Okay? Now, I want to put it to you. If any of you have ever fallen in love, there's no way you can measure it. There's no way you can weigh it. There's no way you can know it. You can only feel it. Yeah? You can only feel it. And there are many aspects of human life wherein reason and rationality do not work. They're not meant for that. They are simply, reason is simply an intellectual tool which can be used well. It's an intellectual tool which has limited uses. Okay? What's happened is that the basic underlying question of our societies is this. Is this true? Okay, so it's like a proposition. Is this true? And how can it be proven? Yeah, and if you think about it a little bit and consider it, and you look at the way that we approach almost everything in academia, elsewhere, the major underlying question is this true? And how can it be proven? Okay, which is shall we say, the essential question of the Enlightenment and the essential question of rational thinking, which in some cases is useful to think like that, but not in every case. Okay, and the world that we have now inhabiting is a world where this is the dominant form of questioning. Now there is an alternative. There is an alternative, and that alternative can be found. And I'm not proposing that this is the only way, but one alternative can be found within the religious world. And I don't particularly mean, Deen Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or anything else. But it is one way, a kind of a spiritual way of viewing the world, a spiritual way of thinking about the world. There is a poetic way of thinking as well. There are different forms of thinking that we used to have, which are being diminished more and more. Okay, there's several different ways of thinking which we're now seeing less and less, and we're seeing less and less through the use of different types of language. For instance, poetry has declined considerably in the last 200 years. Religious thought has become itself, in many cases, religious thought itself has become rational. Yeah. The I'm going to put forward an argument here that the Wahhabiyya and the Salafiyya movements within Islam are rational expressions of the Muslim impulse. Yeah, Islam was never, ever primarily a political or a scientific force. It was a spiritual. The first manifestation of Islam was in the cave of Hira, within the wahi of the Prophet Muhammad. Okay, so it was a spiritual movement. It was not a political or scientific or social experiment. Okay, so almost all of our thinking, even now religion, in the Christian world as well, there's a very good book by a man called John Drake called The Mcdonaldization. By the way, I'm not sure if any of your listeners have heard of Mcdonaldization. Mcdonaldization is a perfect example of the rationalist domination of our world. Okay, and there's something called the Mcdonaldization of the church. Okay, so within Christianity, this is also true. Okay, so in almost everything. So I've said the reductionist mental system. Okay, because it's reductionist. The reductionist mental systems of Freud and Piaget and others hold sway over our schooling. Okay, schooling is now completely based on, is this true and how can it be proven? Yeah, of promoting purely rational ideas to all subject matter. It's a codification of human endeavor, and it makes individuals into units of consumerism, technical reason, analytic rationalism, which saps the vital forces of life within the human collective, and transforms everything, including people themselves, into objects of calculation and control. Okay? Now, I'm just going to finish off with a poem by a medieval, it's very short, don't worry, it's very, very short. And I want just to compare, to show you an example of how we view things. So this little poem is 2 lines, and it's about a rose, okay? It's by someone called Angelius Silesius, and it's called Without Why. And it says, the rose is without why. It blossoms because it blossoms. It has no care for itself or whether it is seen, okay? Now, the way that we would look at a rose now, we probably cut it off, take it down into the lab, cut it open. What is it that makes this grow? Why does this, what is the content of water that it sucks up during the, how much does it need? What is the fertilizer? You understand what I'm saying? Whereas the rose itself is just a phenomenon of jamil, something of beauty, which manifests, and we need to be able to function in the 2 worlds. Slowly, we're losing the poetic sense of the world, and we're becoming more and more, as we said, technical reasoning. Okay, I rest my case. Your microphones are off.
Yeah, we're back. Okay, thank you so much for everything you said. There's one thing I want to ask you about, because I think I don't know about Mcdonaldization, and I think probably people watching us won't actually know about it. If you can just give us an idea about
it. Can you repeat, what was it that you wanted to know?
The concept you talked about earlier, the Mcdonaldization.
Mcdonaldization?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Mcdonaldization is a theory, is a social theory developed by a man called George Ritzer. And if you haven't read it, I strongly advise you to read Mcdonaldization, because you'll see that many areas of our consumer and material life is dominated by Mcdonaldization. Okay, so it's not talking about McDonald's itself, but it's talking about the model that McDonald's developed, established, and developed. Okay, and I think there's 4 components to Mcdonaldization. One of them is standardization. Okay, so that when you go to McDonald's, if you order patate frites, you get, every time you'll get exactly the same weight of patate frites, because they have a way of doing it. Yeah, it will have been cooked exactly for the same time, with the same amount of oil everything is standardized, yeah, including the whole restaurant itself. If you go to a McDonald's restaurant here, just outside of Rabat on the way to Ifran, you will have the same food that you would have in Moscow, Russia, okay, or that you would have anywhere else in the world. So standardized. Second is quantification, okay, which is, as I said, everything is measured and weighed exactly. The time that you are supposed to be waiting for your meal, the time that it takes, everything is, yeah. Mechanization, as much as possible, and there's always developing new machines that will do things robotically, so that the human element is slowly is pushed out, because the human element is considered in the rational, standardized world as a weak point, because humans are not dependable. They make mistakes. Yeah. And the third is, I can't remember. Sorry, the fourth is, I can't remember. It will come to me. But Mcdonaldization is a system which you see more and more. You know, whenever you go to a place which has different branches and they're wearing uniforms, low-paid staff, unskilled, because it's not a skilled job. Yeah, this is Mcdonaldization, and as I say, it's not just in the food industry; it's in many different industries. Okay, IKEA is an example of Mcdonaldization. Yeah, you'll know what I'm talking about if you think, and we're seeing it in Morocco more and more. Now, I would even suggest you, and I hope no one I have said anybody, but I would say to you definitely that within Islam, there is a Mcdonaldization of Islam. In the UK, there are two types of Coca that you can buy. It's not Coca-Cola, but one of them is called Qibla Cola, and the other one is called Mecca Cola. Yeah, you can now also buy a doll. Yani, what's her name? There's a doll. It's Barbie. Barbie has converted to Islam.
Oh, I think you're speaking about Fulla.
Fulla, yeah. Okay, so all of these are commodifications of the spiritual, commodifications and consumerization of spiritual thing. The whole industry of taking people for Hajj has become a tourism industry, which again is standardized, packaged. So this Mcdonaldization and the everything behind it is seeping into all areas of our life, and we must resist. We must resist, otherwise we're going to become these robots. Human beings will be reduced to robots. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes. Thank you a lot, Professor. I think we have two questions.
Sure.
From our viewers. The first question is from Muhammad Adnan Al-Khiyati. The question is, how is Mcdonaldization related to church or religion in general?
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Si Muhammad. Well, I went a little bit over what I just said now. In this book, quite well-known book by John Drain, in America, for instance, there are these things called mega churches, okay? And people can go to the mass, the ritual, the Christian ritual, 2,000, 3,000 people at a time. And as they go into the church, there's banks, there's food things, there's food places. You can pay, contribute money in a standard. Everything has been standardized. Okay, everything has been standardized. And as I said to you before, there are examples as well within the Muslim world as well, and it's becoming increasingly so. So we're not talking about the spirit of Islam. We're not talking about the but we're talking about the deen, shall we say, the deen, what's known as the religion of Islam, especially in countries like Saudi Arabia, whose culture goes very alongside the American culture, where Mcdonaldization is supreme. We're seeing some instances. The Burj at the site of the Mecca is a like a hotelier's dream. Yeah, it's being packaged. It's being the word is reified as well. It's being commodified. I could give you lots of written examples and films, but we don't have time here. But if Si Mohammed would like to get in touch, maybe if you could give him my address, then I'm happy to send things on. Yep.
I think we also have another question from Leila Kurumi. It's a little bit of a long question. So she's saying the scientific or rational understanding of how a rose comes to blossom can add beauty and fascination to how we see the world and nature around us. Why is that way of thinking necessarily in opposition to the inherent beauty of a rose? I think that was because of the example you gave to the rose and how we cannot ask for why.
Okay, so I think can you do a bit slowly because it was a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she's saying the scientific or rational understanding of how a rose comes to blossom can add beauty and fascination to how we see the world and nature around us. Why is that way of thinking necessarily in opposition to the inherent beauty of a rose?
Okay. Lala Leila, shukran. Assalamu alaikum. Leila, you are absolutely right. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, I think that the scientific view can add to our sense of beauty. But however, the problem is that increasingly the scientific view is taking dominance. Okay, so if you look at universities in Europe, the USA, Canada, should we say over the first world, and even in Morocco now, universities increasingly are cutting back on the humanities. Okay, the humanities are becoming less and less. Less money is spent on the humanities department. Less professors hired to teach humanities. There's more and more emphasis on technology and science. Okay, so no one is saying that we shouldn't have a scientific view and that it shouldn't take part in the way that we see the world, but it should be a part. It should not be the only way that we see the world. Okay, and we're not at that stage at the moment, but we're getting there. And if we don't start thinking about it now, in the future we're going to be having problems. Okay. And there's no doubt about it that technology has affected the way that we behave and we think. I just did a course at Al Hawaii on science and society, and the effects of the mobile phone on the human capacity for attention. Okay, so the human attention has now been consumerized. It's now become something that has come into the market. So the application companies are competing for human attention, and as you probably know, you and me, and when we're talking to someone, they're looking at their phone. So we live in a technologized world, and we live in a science-based, rational world, and we need to be very careful, and we need to resume some of the human and poetic, reflective, spiritual. I'm not talking about religious necessarily, but let's say ruhaniya. We need to return to those ways of thinking. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. We have another question by Miriam Lamiri. She says, does the Enlightenment make the whites believe that they are more intelligent than other races?
Okay. I don't mean to laugh at the question, but I see the point. I wouldn't quite put it quite in that manner, but we can say that as a result of the mainly Anglo-Saxon, European approach to scientific knowledge, to rationalism, etc., which has come forth from the Enlightenment, we can say that in a sense, European countries, you have two things which followed from that. One is the Industrial Revolution, which followed on from the Enlightenment. And then there was a second Industrial Revolution in the United States, and that the Enlightenment, the material progress, the Industrial Revolution resulted in those countries, if you like, becoming economically powerful, and therefore setting about the world and trying to colonize other countries and to civilize them. I'd say with quotation, to civilize them. We could say that in a sense, Europe, there is a European, what do we used to call it, God mentality, that there is an idea that the European, I don't think it's the case anymore, but we still are very much in the after effects, the European God concept, that they are the superior civilization. Okay, and I think we're seeing now more and more that that's actually not the case. We have whole swathes of history which are ignored. Spain, for instance, a country which I've had a lot to do with, up until very recently, they never mentioned the presence of the Muslim, of Islam in the peninsula of Spain, and they never mentioned the advances in irrigation, in science, in astronomy, in agriculture, etc. Never mentioned those things at all. It was as if something 900 years just passed over. Okay, and that was before discriminatory Islam, what you call it, Islamophobia. That was before that. Okay, so this is something that's been going on a long time. So I suppose in a way we could say that I don't know if I'd call it white, but I'd call it European. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers the question asked by Miriam. Also, if there's any other questions from the viewers, please let us know. So yeah, Rita, would you like to ask one of the discussion questions?
Yes, we have prepared a few questions for the discussion, and one of them was, what defined the dominance of Europeans in science and technology when we're talking about Enlightenment, and what element would be the one that pushed them to feel that they are dominant in science and technology?
Well, there's one answer to that: money. Yeah, money, which was generated through industrialization, which came early to Europe, specifically started in the north of England in the 1800s, the first Industrial Revolution, which, not only, but it caused for a wealthy class to develop and the poor to become even poorer than they were before. For lots of social reasons. People came from the countryside into the cities and lived in terrible conditions so that they could work in the new factories. Okay, so poverty was just increased, whereas their way of life prior to that in the country, I'm not going to say it was ideal, but at least they had things to eat. But now when they went into the city, it was a question of having money, otherwise you couldn't eat. So not only did it cause, should we say, colonialism, but it also caused, which in itself has racist connotations, but it also caused the development of strict social classes, and the development of what we call an underclass. They're not even poor; they're under poor, an underclass. So it comes about through that, and as a result of that industrialization, people not realizing that who was it? Was it Saint Teresa who said, the West is materially wealthy but spiritually poor. Yeah. So it's also, how is wealth qualified? How is wealth described? If we see it as purely material, then, you know, something else is going to suffer. If we see it as purely spiritual, then, you know, we do need to also worry about how we get through life. But yeah, it's that. It came as a result of the industrialization, which came from the Enlightenment. Yeah.
Thank you for answering that. I think Hiba has another question for you before ending.
Yes, I do. My question would be, what are the consequences of this dominance of science and technology that we are witnessing today on today's landscape, whether it is politics, society, etc.? And can we actually say that the division between the South and the North is derived from this sense of superiority, the division that we witness today?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Again, I think it stems from the wealth which was engendered through means of scientific application. Yeah. Which we see as progress. Okay. The word progress here is very, very important. Okay. Progress is a myth, in my view. In my opinion, it's a complete myth. Yes, we can now. I can talk to you now here on a computer, and you're. I don't know where you are. I'm here in Rabat. You may be far away, but we can talk like this, see each other. But I mean, so maybe 50 years ago, 100, we couldn't have done that. But the question remains: are our lives significantly better because we can talk like this? I mean, yes, it's nice, it's good, but are our lives now so much better because we can do this? I would suggest maybe not. Yeah. So the notion of progress is something I think which we really need to. Do we have now more wars than we ever did before? The answer to that is yes. Yeah. Have we? This is really now. Have we conquered the diseases of the world? I don't even have to answer that one. Look where we are. Yeah. The reason we're having to use this is because we haven't. So the notion of progress is the danger here. So inequality comes from the pursuit of money, and progress eats up the idea of progress, plows into the countryside, into nature, and it doesn't view nature anymore as a thing of beauty within itself. It views nature as, how can I make money from it? Okay. We don't look down and we see a river which is flowing very fast. We don't look down and say, oh, this is beautiful. No, we look down and say, yeah, we could get those wheels to kind of turn, and we could have sawmills to make wood, and how can we use these powers of nature? How can we use them? Okay. The wind is now being commodified. The sun is being commodified. I mean, they're good ways because they're sustainable, but nature is no longer the setting in which we live. It's that which we attack. We attack it to squeeze out the money that we can get from it. Okay. So the progress means in 50, 100 years is the world that we have now is not going to be the same world as our grandchildren or our great grandchildren are going to have. Okay. So we're all in the immediate. It's all immediate. It's all, what can we get now? Yeah. And that the wealth which is generated goes into the pockets of a few people. It doesn't go into the wider. Yeah. Also, the fact that you're not living in a house made of mud, tob, in the I don't know, in Wazen, but now you've got a nice little duplex apartment with a car and a garage, a wife and two children, and a mortgage. It's just another form of slavery. Yeah, and mortgages are another form of slavery, and so we have now the modern life, especially in Morocco. the art of like conversation and relating to one another and discussion and so on is being lost by the cable television. Okay, so we need to ask, is this really progress? Is this really progress? And I would suggest to you that, you know, it's not all progress at all. In fact, it's very damaging, and it does not have a good outcome for the future.
Definitely, thank you, Dr. Trevathan, for everything. We would, I think you have told us a lot of things about everything we wanted to know about. So I think that's great. We would like just to have like a last word or some sort of a summary to summarize everything and the points that we have made today. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Well, I would just summarize what I've said. Is that the Enlightenment was a period which is, as Rita said at the beginning, which was put forward as a positive thing. Yeah. And I think that we must now, looking back on what's occurred, I think that we need to rethink the effects of the Enlightenment. And I think that there are certain areas, not all, there's certain areas where we need to pull back on. And there should be more promotion of the arts, because the arts, that is, and I'm talking about poetry, literature, theater, anything of an artistic bent, which causes us to feel and think in a different way than just rational thinking. These need to be promoted. Yeah. In Morocco, you know, Taqaf, you know, the culture of Morocco needs to be sustained. It shouldn't become like a museum piece or something which you push out at parties, and then as soon as the party is over, you pull it away again. No, it needs to be part and parcel of everyday life. We need to look back in the past and see those things which were good. An example would be in architecture, for example, in the countryside. You know, earth buildings can be very beautiful, and they can be made to look very beautiful. If you look in New Mexico, they've got beautiful buildings, and this is very cheap, and it's also very good for the environment, and also it's very it's warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So we need to relook things. We need to look at the world in a different way. Away from the notions of progress and immediate and greed, immediate cash-making projects. And I think, you know, it's up to us. The change is not going to come from anyone except us. First of all, starting in our own lives, and then also working in conjunction with people around us who are like-minded. Yeah, so that's what I would say. I'm not saying let's go back to living, you know, like our great-great-grandfathers, and you know, I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying let's look back, let's look at the world around us, and let's look at the effects of what we think progress has given us, and see if we can find a mixture of the good and the bad. Yeah.
Definitely, it's a great idea. I actually just want to express that I actually share your ideas, and I hope more people do that, so we could have a mixture of rationality and actually art. Yeah. Hiba, would you like to add anything?
Actually, I don't have anything to add. It was a very interesting discussion, and we would like to thank you for accepting our invitation to join us today. For the viewers, if you still have any questions to ask or comments to make, please do. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you so much for being with us today. And for being the state of the world, the coronavirus, and we still can have a very great discussion, even if we're really away from each other. That's so great. Right. And it was delightful to have you with us. Now we're just going to take the time to go over your summary in Arabic and try to translate everything to people. It would be, if you want to continue watching, it's fine.
I can stay online in case once you explain it in Arabic, there may be other questions if you like. Okay, I'm here.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. So sure. I'm just gonna go over the points you have made in your summaries and just try to translate them, me and Hiba, and we can both have a little bit of a discussion. And in the meantime, for all our viewers, if you have any question, please let us know. عافاكم اللي كيتفرج فينا واللي عنده اي سؤال بالعربيه بالفرنسيه بالانجليزيه تفضلوا عطاو لنا باي لغه بغيتو وحنا غادي نحاولوا نجاوبكم دابا. في هذا الاثناء غادي نكونوا كنحاولوا نشرحوا بالعربيه اشنو واقع اشنو تكلمنا عليه اليوم، وفي نفس الوقت معنا الدكتور تريفيثان باقي معنا وغادي يجاوبكم على الاسئله ديالكم الا سولتونا حاليا. دونك نبداو ببعض النقاط اللي تكلم فيهم الدكتور في السمري ديالو. اننا خاصنا نعاودوا نفكروا مجددا في نتائج عصر الانوار، النتائج اللي كنا حنا لا رجعنا للدراسات اللي درسناهم في الاعدادي في الثانوي خصوصا في المدرسه المغربيه، دائما ما كنلقاو انهم 100% ايجابيين، اي انها واحد لا بيريود، واحد الحقبه اللي دزنا عليها في التاريخ واللي جعلت العالم افضل في واحد الوقيته، ولربما حنا ديما كناخذوها على انها واحد الحاجه اللي ايجابيه واللي ما غيرت لنا حتى حاجه في حياتنا بطريقه سلبيه، وهي الحاجه اللي الدكتور اليوم تكلم لنا عليها وحاول يخلينا انه ربما عندها بعض السلبيات اللي حنا ما كنشوفوهمش، واللي ربما انها عطات المنطق وكيف ما كنقولوا راشناليتي واحد الحموله كبيره لدرجه اننا تخلينا حاليا على الابداعات الفنيه، وان الابداعات الفنيه اللي كانت قبل من عصر الانوار ما بقاتش كيف ما هي من بعد. في الاول كنا كنشوفوا الى شفنا الوقت اللي كانت اللي كان فيه الفن كيتكلم كيدوي على الرومانسيه، اللي كانوا الناس كيحاولوا يشوفوا الطبيعه بشكل جميل، الانسان بشكل جميل. من بعد ولينا كنشوفوا افكار اخرى اللي خرجت من بعد، وحاليا كنلقاو ان التعبير خصوصا في المغرب مثلا ما كنلقاوش بزاف ديال الكتابات، بزاف ديال المعارض ديال الرسم، بزاف ديال الحوايج الناس ما بقاوش كيعبروا بالطرق اللي هي ادبيه وفنيه. يمكن تقولي شي حاجه هبه ولا تبغي تقولي شي حاجه؟
انا اللي غنبغي نزيد هو الكونسيبت اللي عجبني بزاف اللي الاستاذ دوا عليه، هو الماكدونالديزيشن، اللي هو نقدروا نقولوا ميم لا باناليزاسيون ديال شحال من حاجه، سواء في الدين ولا سواء في الحياه ديالنا اليوميه ديال فوالا نقدر نقولها باناليزاسيون. عجبتني بزاف حيتاش من بين الاشياء اللي نتجات على العصر الانوار واللي حنا باقي لحد الان تنشوفوها، ونقدروا كاع نربطوها بالراسماليه اللي حنا عايشين فيها، النظام الراسمالي اللي عايشين فيه وسط منه اليوم، واللي حتى هو نتيجه على عصر الانوار وبزاف ديال المهم نتيجه ديال عصر الانوار وسي. دونك فوالا هادو هو النقطه المهمه اللي انا شخصيا عجبتني واللي كنرتبط لها بزاف دابا سورتو في المغرب مؤخرا تلاحظوها بزاف في العالم كامل مع العولمه مع كي قلت قبل الراسماليه. دونك فوالا هاد النقطه هي اللي كنت باغا نشير لها.
حاجه اخرى اللي يمكن لنا نربطوها بها هبه هي اننا مؤخرا ولينا كندويو بزاف على لا كولونيزاسيون ولا الاحتلال ديال الدول الاوروبيه لافريقيا، ونقدروا ناخذ كمثال اقرب حاجه لينا اللي هو البلاد ديالنا اللي هي المغرب، واللي تم احتلالها من طرف الفرنسيين والاسبانيين. هذا الاحتلال ربما ما كانش غادي يكون ولا بطريقه اخرى نصوغ بها الجمله ديالي، وهي انه كيرجع واحد الفضل كبير لا كولونيزاسيون لعصر الانوار، وربما شي واحد قبل ذكر ذا وايت مانز بيردن هي حمل الرجل الابيض. ممكن تقولي الفكره ديالك عليها هبه الى
يس بيان سور. المهم القضيه اللي قلتي غنبدا من الفكره اللي قلتي ديال ان عصر الانوار هو اللي جبد لنا هذه القضيه ديال الكولونياليزم. كاين القضيه اوسي ديال واحد glorification ديال واحد الفاليوز اللي حملوهم من عصر الانوار، بقاو شادين فيهم، وبالنسبه لهم هما انهم خاصهم يجيو يوصلوهم للبلدان الاخرين باعتبار الدول الاخرين انهم في عصر الظلمات، حيت هما كانوا في عصر الظلمات. دونك جابوا معاهم داك الحس ديال الاعلاء، تنقول الاعلاء التعالي بليتو، فوالا الحس ديال التعالي، التعالي ديالهم جابوه تعالي في كل شيء، واللي حد الان اليوم باقي تيتشاف في المغرب باقي. التعالي ديال الاوروبيين على المغاربه، واللي تتشاف صراحه في العالم كامل، هو انك كتشوف ديما غادي نستعمل التيرم ديال الوايت مان ولا الانسان الابيض، كتلقاه ديما عنده داك البريفيليج على الاخرين. ونقدروا كاع نقولوا بالليتست موفمنت اللي كان في الولايات المتحده الامريكيه، هو انه كيفاش انه مؤخرا كاين واحد الرفض كلي اللي كنا دوينا عليه مع استاذ إليوت، كاين واحد الرفض كلي اليوم لهاد المبادئ اللي جاتنا من عندهم، نسموهم هما من عندهم، واللي تفرضات علينا. اليوم كاين واحد اعاده نظر في هاد المبادئ كاملين، فوالا، واللي كيترتب عليها بزاف ديال الاشياء اللي سورتو تلاحظات في هاد الايامات. فوالا.
وحده من الافكار اللي عجبتني بزاف اللي دوينا عليها هي لامبورطونس ديال الفلوس دابا. بسبب عصر الانوار ولا عندنا من بعد شنو كنقولوا العصر ديال industrialization اللي بسببها الانسان ولا عنده الاهميه انه يربح بزاف ديال الفلوس، اللي بسببها خرجوا لنا دي كلاس سوسيال بحال الطبقه اللي غنيه والطبقه المتوسطه والطبقه اللي فقيره، واللي كيف ما قال لنا الاندر كلاس شوف اكثر من الفقر. ولاو عندنا اختلافات لحد الان اللي باقيين كنعيشوها دابا. كنشوفوا ان الثروه متركزه، اللي هي واحد المساله اللي كندويو عليها بزاف في المغرب، الثروه متركزه في واحد البلاصه بالضبط، وفي العالم كنعرفوا انها متركزه عند واحد البورسونتاج قليل ديال الناس وماشي الاغلبيه، والفقر كثير في العالم. وهذا شي حوايج اللي ماشي نتائج ايجابيه العصر الانوار. الى قلنا بطريقه غير مباشره انها كانت السبب في هذا الشيء. الى جينا كنشوفوا هذا الشيء اننا ملي ولينا كنشوفوا في ان كيف ما قال الاستاذ اننا ولينا كنشوفوا في الطبيعه شي حاجه كيفاش غادي نربحوا منها الفلوس، وماشي شي حاجه اللي كيفاش غادي نربحوا منها الجمال ديالها، كيفاش غنتعايشوا معاها وكيفاش غنكملوا معاها، لدرجه اننا ولاو عندنا مشاكل بيئيه حاليا اللي الناس كيهضروا عليهم واللي ما قدرناش لحد الان حتى نحاولوا نحاربوا عليهم، لان ببساطه العالم الراسمالي كيحكم كل شيء، وما يمكنش لينا نخسروا الفلوس باش نحافظوا على البيئه. وصلنا لواحد الوقيته فين يمكن لينا نقولوا بان واحد النهار غادي يسالي كل شيء وحنا ما كنعتنيوش بالاجيال القادمه اللي جايه. وهذا سبب اننا وصلنا ليه من بزاف ديال السنوات، واللي ربما عمرنا ما دوينا عليه في المدرسه ولا عرفنا انه سبب من هذا الشيء ديال عصر الانوار،
واللي نقدروا نربطوها حتى اليوم الوباء اللي حنا تنعيشوا فيه. سواء كيف ما كان الاصل ديالو، ولكن راه كيبقى انه بسبب التحولات البيئيه اللي حنا تنعيشوها، وهاد التحولات البيئيه اللي اثرت على الحياه ديالنا ديال كل يوم، واللي حنا كيف قلتي فضلنا المال على الطبيعه وعلى بزاف د الحوايج، وحنا اليوم تنشوفوا لي كونسيكونس ديال داكشي.
اكزاكتومون. الحاجه اللي بغيت نعاود نقولها ونسمرايزيها عاوتاني بالعربيه هو النصيحه الاخيره ديال الدكتور تريفيثان اللي كيقول فيها باننا هذا هو الوقت فين حنا كاملين نحاولوا نبعدوا على الفلوس ونحاولوا نكونسونطراو على حوايج اللي مهمه اكثر. اننا نحاولوا نرجعوا للتعبير، اننا نعبروا على حوايج بطرق اخرى، اننا نرجعوا الكتابه ديال البويتري ديال الشعر ديال الروايه ديال الفن اون جينيرال، الرسم، جميع انواع الفن اللي كاينه. نرجعوا للفن، نرجعوا للتعابير اخرى، نبعدوا ما امكن على ذاك الهدف ديال اننا نبغيو نجمعوا الثروه، لاننا كل ما اتجهنا نحو جمع ديال ديك الثروه كل ما فقدنا الانسانيه ديالنا، وكل ما فقدنا واحد الجزء من اننا نعرفوا راسنا اكثر ونعرفوا الطبيعه اللي دايره فينا اكثر. وبطبيعه الحال خدينا واحد الفرصه للاجيال القادمه بانها تعيش حتى هي.
متفقه معك ريتا في كل شيء. عندنا واحد السؤال من عند مريم العامري اللي شاركته معنا دابا. Colonization makes the third world countries poor despite all the efforts. What do you think will happen in the future and it can change things? جو بونس مريم هنا قصدت ان كيفاش ان الاستعمار جعل دول العالم الثالث فقيرة جدا، ووقيلا هي تتساءل على كيفاش نقدروا نبدلوا هذا الشيء من هنايا لقدام، هاد لا سيتوياسيون اللي حنايا في هذا.
Dr. Tran, if you can answer another question coming from Miriam Nanidi. She's saying that colonization makes the third world countries poor despite all the efforts. What do you think will happen?
I heard.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I switch between two things depending on how I'm feeling on that day. One is, particularly the third world countries, they need to develop their own sources. The post-colonial, for instance, Algeria and perhaps Morocco to some extent, maybe lesser, but Algeria is still a colony of France. It's a colony of France, not in the way that it was before, but it's a kind of economic colony. That it is the French market which most of the Algerian goods go to, and I think I'm not sure if it's the same for Morocco, not quite the same, but those, should we call it post-colonial colonialism, that now should be ended, and the third world countries need to look for other economic partners. The second thing is this is totally radical, and most people are going to disagree, but they need to kind of temporarily, at least, to not follow the route which the first world, the developed world, has gone. They need to develop their economies in terms of agriculture, and their first primary aim should be to feed their own people, not to be sending cash crops abroad. So I would say huge agricultural reform, and I would say also falling back on traditional methods of building and providing housing and so on, and not looking to sophisticated technology, but rather what's called soft or intermediate technology, so that they don't have huge costs involved. And they need to be, people in power need to be removed, and other people need to take their places. Yeah, that's easily said than done. But I mean, a new form of ethics, a new accountable form of ethics needs to take place. That's very easily said and very seldom achieved over thousands of years, but at least striving for that is worth it. At least attempting to do that is worth it. Yeah, I mean, even if you die in the attempt, your life has been something worthy. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, the poverty is caused completely by the world economics. It's nothing else. But yeah.
Thank you a lot.
Yeah. Hiba, I think the next comment is actually for what we have been talking about. So I think we're going to be answering it. So Mohammed BKF is saying that I think social crises were existing even before the age of lights. I think he's talking about, if not based on money, there were separation, even religion, and also money. And I think when we're talking about this, we're going to go back to feudalism. When we had some sort of social classes, but they were vastly different compared to the social classes we have now in our life. And I think if we want to compare the social classes we have now, it would be easier to compare them with the classes we had after industrialization than to compare them with the social classes that we had during feudalism.
Can I just see Mohammed saying that feudalism might be a form of society that we should reconsider? Is that what he's saying?
No, he's actually just saying that probably how we said that the social classes we have right now are actually some sort of result of the Enlightenment. And he's saying that the social classes existed before Enlightenment, so it's probably that's what I'm getting from his comment, that it's probably not a result of enlightenment. And I'm just saying that those social classes we had before enlightenment are purely based on the aristocrats, where we're going to be talking about aristocracy, and that's not something we actually have a lot today, or it's not something we cannot even relate to that a lot. And but we can relate a lot to what happened after industrialization.
Yeah, feudalism, no doubt, was a social structure. I agree with him on that. You know, I mean, this is totally right, but I'm not. You know, are we better off now? Or is the situation better now than it was in the feudal times? I'm not sure if it was. Yeah, I'm not saying that either are good, but I'm thinking that maybe land reform, so you don't have feudalism, and very strong agricultural reforms, so that things are grown for the country, not grown for the outside. If there is surplus, okay. But yeah, social class has always existed, but it's particularly poignant. I mean, a lot of the race issues are very closely tied with class. Okay, because remember that, for instance, in the United States, you know, we have the Black Lives Matter now. All of that stems from the cotton mills, the slavery of Africans in the United States to feed the industrial machine of the second industrial revolution. And the problem is that neither of the parties, the slave owners and the slaves, are being able to break out. The slaves, shall we say, are not being allowed to break out, and the slave owners are still in that mentality. So the history, you know, as you probably, you know, because this is a history site, you know, history has so many implications and consequences. It's not something in the past. It's here now. It's here now. So the United States is a very particular case. And I think that we're seeing now the dissolution. I think we're seeing the decomposition of the social experiment of the United States. It's not going to regain. If another president comes, who shall we say, it's not going to be difficult to be better than Trump, but it's lost. It's a civilization on the downturn. Yeah.
Definitely. I think Muhammad wrote back to us, and he's saying that his question is why sometimes people look for an excuse. I'm thinking for the revolution. The revolution was a good thing. The way countries take it is the problem. African countries didn't follow the train, and now we are collecting the fruit of what we did. I think from what I got is that he's asking why is there some sort of difference between the revolutions that happened in Europe and in other places and did not happen in African countries, and now because of what happened, I think with this revolution, because they were a result of enlightenment, people actually colonized African countries, and now we're paying off that. I'm thinking that's the question, because I cannot really.
Yeah, I mean, the thing here is the difference between it's. Should we put it this way? It's all in the Muqaddimah of Ibn Khaldun. Yeah, you have the people, the urban people, in this case of the north, shall we say, of North Europe, who industrialized, and then you have the agrarian or the Bedu or whatever you like. Yeah, who so. Africa has been, you know, for up until very recently, have been agrarian societies. So the same type of revolution would never take place. It's tribal. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing is that what's happened is that the northern countries have quickly applied their industrialization to make money and to, you know, what you call it, to capitalize and to take out of Africa. That's the problem. And the mixture between these two societies and systems has been devastating for the poor, devastating. Yeah. And I think we have a new level or a new quality of poverty, which we did not have in the past, because poverty in the past maybe there is a lack of money, but there was never a lack of food. You know, so poverty is different. The only time that countries are really or populations are really in trouble when there are climatic problems, you know, droughts and so on. Yeah, but apart from that, the type of poverty that we see now is, you know, what wasn't here before.
Thank you for your answer. I think Hiba, would you read for us the next question from Ayub Lamin?
Yes. So Ayub said, why did the Enlightenment / the Industrial Revolution happen in Europe and not elsewhere? China, for example. I think it happened, but in other forms. Yeah, not in the same.
There were huge social advances, shall we call it, if you want to call them that. Because I don't think the Enlightenment was an advance myself, but there were similar situations in China, as you say, also, and some of the Benin in Africa as well had a huge resurgence, and also in the past there's also the Indus Valley civilization. So there have been movements, but why the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution in Europe? Well, that's a question I can't answer. Basically, I mean, I think it was the turn away. I think it was the turn away from in the Renaissance, the turn away from the idea that God was a constant presence in the world, and that people were guided by divine inspiration. I think that was the main cause. You know, the turn away, if you like, in a sense, from the idea of divine guidance. Yeah. And where it became people were the center of the universe. Yeah. It's a good question. I don't have a direct answer. There probably is one, but I can't think of it.
I think it's a very deep question. It's like something you should go and do our research for it. It's not something you just can answer casually. Yeah. But it's a good research question. If
that's a very good question.
It'd be great if a professor gives a paper next semester to the students about it.
Good idea. Good idea. Well done for a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I would like to add on the question of Ayub is that Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, has become more like a concept, and I think what he meant is that why didn't that concept, as we witnessed in Europe and had its repercussions on Africa and elsewhere in the world, did it have its alter ego in China or some other parts in the world? And as you said, it's a very interesting question that requires research and also knowledge of the history in Asia. Yeah.
Well, not just Asia, because I mean, I think there are other areas. I think, for instance, the Mayan and Aztec civilization also had a huge sort of upcoming as well. But yeah. It was something to do. It was something to do with the idea that the mind, you know, with the Descartes thing, which, as I said to you, with them, we never know if philosophers have the original idea, or if actually they're reflecting something that's there but hasn't yet been articulated. So Descartes, this idea that the mind separated from the body, you did not have anywhere else. So I mean, that's one major difference. So the idea that the mind and the separation from nature, okay, the separation from nature, and that nature was something that we could use, which, you know, you just didn't have in other countries. People, in the same way that people would not go around wrecking their house, you know, smashing down the you know, or cutting up the sofa so they could sell pieces off. In the same way, people in over the whole world wouldn't go smashing up their land, you know, for social advancement, whereas in Europe they did. And because Europe is relatively small, when it got too small and there were no more forests or things then they had to go elsewhere. So then it's like a rolling stone that gets bigger and bigger as it goes on, and there's nothing to stop it. And then also they had to create markets. And so the European market was now flooded, so now they had to find other markets. Yeah? So, yeah, I mean, if we look at American colonization, which is not the same as, should we say, the British or the French colony, it was economic colonization. You know, one of the main motives behind the Vietnamese War was that they needed to open more markets in the East to sell fridges and what they call white consumer goods, cars, etc., etc. So it's a very good question, but it would take a long time to answer, and I think it needs some research. Yeah,
definitely. I think Ayub got back to us and wrote something. He says, I think the environment factor into that. I'm thinking he said, I take the environment factor into that. Europe had an incentive to industrialize due to the lack of resources, which is what you talked about just now. So I think you've gone over that. Yeah. We have a question. I think that's our last one from Yusuf Muqsit. Besides seeing the beauty in our surroundings, shouldn't the exploitation of natural resources be considered as a rather necessary evil, since we need to accommodate the needs of humanity after all?
Well, I take the point. I understand the point. It's a valid point, but we've gone too far. Yeah, we have. I'm going to use a very rude word, but we've raped nature. We've raped nature, and often for things that are just questions of luxury and not necessity. So we need to be now looking at replacing, and also because if we are, let's use this technological mindset to see ways that we can do things without having to destroy, where we're living, the world in which we're living. So a lot has been destroyed for what we call the military industrial complex. Okay, and that, to my mind, has been, for reasons of power and not reasons of human benefit. Always, there have been, but there, a lot of it has been the industrial military complex. So, which is making money for a few people, not for everybody. And I'm not communist or socialist either. But it's just true. It's just phenomena. There's been abuse. There's been abuse of the countryside. There's been abuse of people, and will it stop? I don't know. History says maybe it won't. But the point is, I would like to devote my life, and I would like to, hope that other people will do to devote my life to trying to make it better, even if we don't succeed. It's a life worth living.
I think it has become more of an ethical point of view about these things. It depends on people's ethics when we're talking about these things. Yeah. I guess we got to the end of our first episode. I'm so happy and proud for everything we have done today. We're so delighted for having you here, and thank you so much, Dr. Trevathan, for
it's been a real pleasure.
1 hour and a half with us today to answer all our questions. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be able to talk about these things, because it needs to be talked about. It needs to be so it's a pleasure, and I'm very happy to been able to contribute.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Trevathan. Thank you, Hiba, for being with us, and thank you everybody for being today with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week again at the same time at 7 on Sunday for another episode again.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
good. Bye. I've just recognized you both. I remember you, Rita. I think I saw you in a honors meeting. Was it? Were you on my table?
No. It's not me.
I've seen you. Is it an Achawain or not?
Yeah, we're both from Achawain. Yeah.
Well, that's what I know.
Yeah.
But I thought Rita I saw in an honors one of those meetings where we talked about the honors board. Anyway, see you soon. Take care.
Thank
you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you, and thank you for everything.
You put me on your email. Yeah.
Sure.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
شكرا لكل اللي تابعنا اليوم. الحلقة القادمة إن شاء الله.
إن شاء الله.
سلامة.
شكرا.
سلامة.